So we will start henceforth. Call to order, all present. Correspondence, Fran, for you. I have several letters, one from our esteemed attorney to the town board related to the, I think it was the Bat Rep Theater. I have town board and planning board on account one and two. I have some SHPO reviews and two letters to be for the record. Which we have. With that, we have a discussion on the Star Warehouse. Are we here?
It's been unclear. I know that Diane Hines had reached out to the applicant to remind them that they were going to be on this month's agenda. Just to bring the board up to speed, they had resubmitted their proposed final environmental impact statement. There are some outstanding comments in connection with that document, and including, I believe, Mr. Greeley has provided comments in connection with the FEIS for STAR. The board could either hold this over to a time when the applicant appears, or you could deem the document to be incomplete. You already had previously provided comments from Sean and from Kristen, and I believe that the applicant hasn't resolved several outstanding issues, notably coordination with DOT regarding Route 32, as well as fire safety for fire protection. The water tank is a shared water tank, I'm sure the board recalls, and so those are outstanding issues. I think the board, depending on how you feel, you could either remind them to come in September to address these items, or you can deem the document to be incomplete and have them resubmit.
Mr. Cordisco, is there a timer on this particular action? I know on the DEIS, once we accept the DEIS, there is a timer that runs for acceptance or rejecting that document. But on FEIS, I don't believe there is such a timer. Is that
It's
right?
a really good question because, under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, there is a time frame of adoption of an FEIS that's supposed to occur within 60 days of closing the public hearing. But the FEIS is also supposed to be prepared by the applicant and done to the satisfaction of the board. And so in that regards, they have not yet prepared a document that would be acceptable for this board.
So would it be a good idea then to formally reject to formally call it incomplete to restart the timer?
It would be cleaner.
Mr. Chairman, that's what I recommend.
Okay. With that recommendation, I'll ask for the board's comments and input. Steve?
No, I'm in agreement with that.
With Led's position. Okay, John?
Which Star Warehouse is this? Because there's two applications before the board, right? This is 19?
This is the 2016 application. I don't recall the number of the building offhand, but this is for new construction, I believe, of a 50,000 square foot.
Correct.
It's decision.
Are you in agreement with Led's
I am,
position?
yeah.
Yep.
I'll go along with Glenn's recommendation.
Okay.
You should have a, oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
And
Always
I move-
interested in hearing what you have to say.
No, I was just going to suggest that you have a motion.
Yeah, I move we find the FEIS on the STAR project to be incomplete.
Was a motion, a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. There you go. That was quick. Okay, everybody have a chance to review the minutes? Everybody received the minutes? Any questions? Any issues?
Move we adopt the minutes.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? There we go. Resolutions, we have none. Okay, we have a public hearing scheduled at 7:04. Do we have that rep theater here? We do. For the record, open the public hearing at 7:04.
Who actually from the applicant is?
Wait, doesn't that include opening the public hearing?
Certainly.
You can call it public.
Hello, board members. We're glad to be back here. I understand we have a public hearing and all the notices were sent out. So we're looking forward to continuing with the process. If you want to open it up to the public or me answer questions, whatever chair would like.
We normally don't have questions here for the public hearings, but if there is one that can be answered, we'll have the answer. For the record, we do have all of the certifications on ever-present Diane has the information material for the record. Okay, with that, can I open up the public hearing to the general public? Are there any members of the general public wishing to comment on this project? If so, just state your name and where you live, that kind of stuff. We have a very large turnout and nobody making comments. Okay. So I make a motion to,
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
and second,
Any
all in favor?
comments?
Okay, with that, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll close the public hearing at 7:05. Very good public hearing.
Thank you very much. I'll take credit for that one.
With that, we're looking to how we can assist in moving the project forward and develop less for comments from the consultants. Kristen?
Sure. We had some basic comments on this site plan for the most part. The applicant has been responsive to our comments for the most part. We just had some outstanding items. The application is type 1 under seeker because of the need for the zone change has been requested. At the plenary meeting in June, we discussed a negative declaration briefly. It was determined at that time the applicant was not ready. Now, based on the review from the town engineer, we believe that this application is ready to move forward with a negative declaration under seeker to complete that process.
Thank you, Kristen. Sean?
Yes, to follow up on the negative declaration, we do have some technical comments that I think the applicant's representative could address, most specifically with regards to drainage, but I don't believe that could or should hold up the negative declaration this evening. I'll also note that we did get correspondence from Orange County Department of Public Works with regards to the modifications to the entrance from Angola. But there are 8 items there, but I don't believe that there are any showstoppers, just mostly construction detail related and signage related on the site plan.
Now, Sean, should those be incorporated as part of the neg deck, or can they be incorporated?
I think the applicant should be given another opportunity to go back to the county after the neg deck and potentially be resolved after the town board takes action if they do.
Okay. Okay. For the record. Steve?
What about all the questions you have on your comments? Can they follow up on it?
Most of those are with regards to the drainage and the driveway. One is a reiteration of the proposed water service. They have to add a sprinkler line, which is going to be Department
Do they have copies of it?
of Health. Not yet, but they will.
The only comment I'd like to make is we appreciate the applicant's execution and willingness to make changes and adapt as you want to move into the community or something different. So we appreciate that. Continue to work.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Mary Beth?
I have nothing at this time because I believe someone else is going to talk about the crosswalk. That is what I have, but I will defer to you.
Since the question of the crosswalk has come up, Mr. Cordisco, it's my understanding that it might be prudent to follow the adoption of the zoning change by the town board prior to taking further engineering action on the project. I think we've advanced sufficiently that a neg deck could be adopted at this time with crosswalks, with just the applicant knowing that crosswalks are something that I think are in the future for this project, but could be addressed as part of the final site plan approval rather than being addressed at this early stage. Does that match does my understanding match reality?
Yes, I think that would be a prudent course of action for the board to consider, which would be to close out the environmental review over the general use at this time. There are details regarding the site plan, including crosswalks and other technical comments that have to be addressed. But just so the board and everyone's aware, the zoning doesn't exist yet for the site.
Right.
So even though you had your public hearing tonight and you closed it, the board is not in a position to take any action on the site plan at this time. and would not be in a position to take any action on the site plan unless and until the town board adopts the zoning that would extend the GC district to this other parcel that's surrounded by GC zone. That said, the town board already had their public hearing. This board already reported positively in support of the zone change. And the town board likewise is waiting for this board to complete your environmental review. Once that happens, then the town board would be free to take up and consider whether or not it wants to make the official zoning change at that time.
Okay, so it doesn't make sense to me then to hold up the environmental review over the crosswalk issue. But I do think the applicant should be aware that's something that we'll come back to as we move towards a final site plan approval. Once the zoning is approved and we know what the zoning is for the site.
Is it on one of the comment letters that I'll be receiving this? It's on, okay, so we'll have that and we'll address it. Sure.
Yeah, we'll work that out with the Orange County Department of DPW, Public Works.
Yes, and that's the thing in regards to crosswalks, is if I may, it's not necessarily a decision between the applicant and the town as to whether or not to require it, because it would require a highway work permit from the county DPW and their consensus that this is appropriate, because after all, it is their road, so.
It is. But I do worry about in the event that something at the site drew more parking, I think that currently the parking requirement is 1 car per 3 seats inside the theater. And that's for both patrons and potentially people working the show. And so I think there is a possibility that there would be more than 17 cars required to service a particular event. It's hard to say how many people are going to come in each car. And in that event, people would be parking across the street in the old Chico's parking lot there or along Main Street, and would require a safe passage to the site. And that's both lighting and crosswalks to make that happen. And so we just have to evaluate that to make sure pedestrians can safely arrive at the site in the evening and depart in evening hours.
And very good, Lynn, thank you. It's on the record. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adopt. Take it,
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? There you go. Great. Now you can bring it to the town and perhaps they'll adopt the new zoning change and we can move forward from there.
Yeah, just to get the board's viewpoint, we have submission dates that we need to meet to be before you in presenting the project. Should we continue with those submission dates, or at this point, would you want to wait till we get town board approval of the zone change and then come with a final?
We can't take any action unless the zoning is changed, correct, Tom?
You couldn't grant approval, but you could certainly be providing feedback to the applicant if they want to, on their time and expense to proceed before getting comments from the board and the board's
I
consultant.
think I speak for the board that we have no objection to moving this as reasonably and rapidly as possible. So you want to come back next meeting and with your correspondence with the DPW, Orange County or whatever's necessary, that's fine.
Yeah, we would welcome that open door communication. To the best of my knowledge, we had addressed most of the previous comments, so I'm going to imagine that this round of comments would be more or less a final version to allow us to complete the site plan. So definitely, I'd like to talk to the owner about that and continue with the process to get us through.
You're on.
Great.
Very good.
One other just point of order, if I may, is that the town's code has provision that says that the planning board is supposed to grant or deny site plan approval within 90 days of a closure of a public hearing. However, the zoning yet does not exist, so I think we can all agree that that 90-day clock is not ticking, because if the clock was ticking, then it would have to be a denial. Yeah. I just want to put that on the record that,
Well,
there's no default approval period that's currently running.
We agree.
Thank you. There you go.
Okay. Have a good evening, everyone.
You too. Thanks so much. Okay, with that, you have treated.
So he gets, he gets.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Lucia Giorgio with Penny Fader, and we represent Treetop. I'm joined tonight by Ruben Tversky, the site president of Treetop, Ryan McDermott, the design engineer, and Corey Chase, our traffic engineer from Dynamics. So we were last before you in April for comments on our first submission of the DEIS. We did resubmit on July 14th in response to those comments. Maybe Ryan, you can just briefly describe some of the work that was done in that time and that appears in the DEIS. Overall, the plan has not changed from our last DEIS submission, which was back in January.
That's correct. So again, we were last before the board in early April. Slightly before that, we did receive some review letters from the board professionals, 5 letters in total. And on July 14th, along with the revised DEIS submission package, we included an itemized response to address those 5 letters to the best extent practicable. So most of the comments that have been addressed were some which were technical in nature in Sean's reports, and the bulk of the changes were providing additional analyses, rearranging the DIS for presentation purposes, rock blasting analyses, some off-site utility evaluations, and some traffic analyses. That was the bulk of the information that was added. And as Lucia mentioned, from the 2D perspective, the plan has not really changed. So there's no change in the yield, no change in the circulation, parking, loading, et cetera. So from a high-level standpoint, the plans remain largely the same. It was just the additional analyses that were provided.
Okay. Any comments? Okay, with that, let me go over to Kristen.
So we reviewed the latest revision of the DEIS. We had a few outstanding comments. Most of them are very minor language changes. There's a table in the noise study, for example. It refers to footnotes. The footnotes are actually in the noise study itself. They're in the text, so it makes it difficult. And footnotes relate to how the noise was actually calculated. So fairly important details that are kind of missing from that section of the document. It's really just a faculty of the fact that someone cut and pasted that table and didn't bring forward the footnotes, something minor like that. Probably the only larger issue is the leaf off discussion of the visual impact analysis, which does not discuss, it doesn't discuss impacts from a leaf off perspective. So it only showed the images that are provided, the photo simulations, and the discussion of potential impacts in the document all relate to a leaf on scenario. It shows the trees in a springtime, obviously fully vegetated, and the potential impacts reflect that some of the vantage points are not visible simply because there's significant vegetation in between. There really needs to be a further discussion what those potential impacts would be during winter months when there's no vegetation on the trees. So I think that is probably the only kind of larger missing item. The rest of them are fairly minor language omissions.
Thank you, Kristen. Sean?
Sure. Like Kristen, I had a few comments that were still outstanding with the document. 2 specifically, as the applicant's representative noted, there was a blasting plan put together, as there will be some blasting that will be required on the site. But what I didn't see was the need for any monitoring during blasting of any existing infrastructure nearby or homes or other structures. Secondly, there was some correspondence with Central Hudson for the need for potential upgrades for electric and gas. There was correspondence from Central Hudson that they were currently reviewing on July 7th, but I did not see that analysis back yet. I did have some other items here that I have in my memo, and we also have some SWIP overarching comments as well as some fire safety comments forthcoming.
Yes, I think your review is very comprehensive, Sean. With that also, Phil, you have comments on traffic?
Yes, Philip Greeley, we have August 2nd letter. The applicant has addressed most of the items that we had brought up previously for completeness. There's some additional details that we believe we need. Some of the mitigation measures that they've identified, I think it's appropriate to provide some more information, conceptual plans, and other information so that the board can fully understand what's involved with those. So we actually, the submission from the applicant dated July 12th included a item by item response to our previous comments from March. And what we did was we just went through each item to say, where information still needed to be provided. We provided another annotated copy of the scoping document. And as you can see, most of those items you'll see are labeled A. That means they're fully addressed. There's still a few that are partially addressed and one or two that we felt weren't addressed. So I think the majority of them are pretty straightforward to have the applicant add that information. But again, we really focused on some of the mitigation items that were identified. We need to make sure that they're doable. So we need some more information. There's information requested, some more information on site distances and turning tracks at some of the key intersections. For example, at 9W and Forge Hill, at 9W and Quaker. So I think the applicant has provided some information, but some of it needs to be fine-tuned so that the board can fully understand it. And again, I can go through the whole letter, but I think it's pretty straightforward, the items that we're asking the applicant to cover.
Is the applicant in receipt of your comments?
We only to the board. We can provide them with a copy.
I suggest the board provide them. Chairman, can I amplify Mr. Greeley's comments? Please do.
So to be more blunt,
And this is one other thing before, so we haven't gone through our technical comments yet. This is for completeness, okay? So I think they're pretty close on the completeness. There's a few button-up items. We would also point out that the applicant, if they haven't covered every item, there was a email that was sent from New York State DOT back in April. As you update this document, just make sure you check every one of those items with DOT. It'll just save you some time later on. I think from what I went through quickly, I think most of them were addressed, but just make sure you cover each of those items in detail. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Phil. Thank you very much.
And if I could just expand a little bit on that further, just so we're all clear, like the procedural step that's before the board with submission of a DEIS is that what the board's doing, what the board's obligation to do at this time is to compare what the applicant has provided against the scope that was previously adopted. It's not, in agreement with anything that's being proposed, and it's really making sure that the scope is complied with so that the public can have enough information to review and comment on the application. And that's what's meant by complete. It doesn't mean that the project is ready for approval. It means that it's complete to the point where it's ready for public review. It doesn't mean that anyone necessarily agrees or disagrees with the statements that are being provided, but it's really to make sure that there's enough information that's out there. So as Kristen had mentioned earlier, one of the obligations in the scope that was set forth was the provision of visual analysis that included views into what the site is going to look like in leaf-off conditions. And that's something that's outstanding. I'm sure the applicant's going to provide it, but it's also essential for the public to be able to review the document and to understand what the views of the project are going to look like in leaf-off conditions, since we live in a part of the country that has lease off, 6 months out of the year. So, and that's why it was included in the scope. So when we talk about completeness, we're doing that in terms of comparing it to the scope.
Okay, thank you. And that gets towards my comment, which is that I've stated a couple times previously, and I remain sort of on this particular horse, and that's that I don't fully understand how a southbound truck leaving this site goes anywhere safely. And I don't understand how somebody arriving from the south is getting to 9W. The key intersections are 293, Angola Road, Quaker Avenue. And I think the public needs visuals that show like how a truck actually moves from Quaker onto 9W to arrive at your site, from 9W onto Quaker to leave your site, and to show like what that looks like with a full-size rig. And I don't believe that the DEIS is obligated to supply anything that looks like a rework of those interchanges to provide for safe truck movements. So to get towards Mr. Cordisco's comment, I don't think that that's a completeness question, but it's certainly a question which lingers in the air going into the FEIS. And it would be unfair of me to continue to harbor these views, which I've shared once before, without sharing with you again, that in reading the DEIS, I don't really understand how that southbounder works. If they're coming off that mountain southbound, we saw what happened in this recent flood when we started working that 293 intersection. And it was at 90, and I'm sure many members of the public here and others have had to use that intersection of 293 and 9W southbound. And it was not what I would consider a workable intersection at that time. So while I don't think we can oblige that as part of the DEIS, the issue has not been resolved by the DEIS either. And I think the applicant deserves to know what I'm thinking at this point after having read the thing. Certainly I think Mr. Gurley's also been clear about the requirements of those intersections for safe movements. If you try to get off of 9W, if you're going southbound and try to get off of 9W onto Quaker, that current hairpin turn is not negotiable cannot be negotiated by a large size tractor trailer. I've interacted with some tractor trailers at that intersection myself personally, and it generally involves backup lights by somebody. Either the tractor trailer backing back up onto 9W to let me out, or me backing down towards Quaker to let the tractor trailer out. So I think that ultimately will have to be addressed. In terms of the DEIS adoption, I agree with Mr. Cordisco that the leaf-off condition is necessary in public analysis, but I also believe further visuals for the working of tractor trailers at those intersections would be helpful to the public, not just from a traffic engineering point of view, but I mean like something that the public can clearly understand for how it's going to work under the mitigations you're currently proposing. Thank you.
Thank you. A question, Phil, were any of the comments, as I understood, there were comments from the town of Newburgh, the city of Newburgh, or the town of New Windsor?
So the city of Newburgh had provided comments. They were actually after the scoping document was completed. The applicant has addressed those in the document, okay? So they did a supplemental item by item of the comments that came in from the city. So they were outside of the scope, but the applicant has addressed them or incorporated.
I realize they're outside of the scope.
And some of those areas that the DOT commented on actually are some of the locations in the town or city of Newburgh. That was the April correspondence and email from DOT requesting certain clarifications. And in terms of the turning tracks that Led is referring to, the applicant did provide some documents showing turning movements for WB 67's tractor trailers. And but we've asked for some clarifications because some of them were done on aerial photographs, and it's hard to understand because you have guide rails and other fixed objects. So I think it's important for completeness, at least, for example, like Quaker and 9W, demonstrate that, because it'll make it easier for the public to understand, and it'll also help the applicant when they get to the permitting steps with DOT.
And Phil, are they currently showing both entering and leaving at that Quaker and 9W intersection
Yes.
of workups? I think they are.
Yes.
I only had one question in regard to, it was also mentioned about a traffic light, and since we're discussing the ramps. Is there going to be any additional information in regard to the possibility, not just the mention of traffic lights at those ramp entrance and exits, but is there any comment, and I know you just said it's not in the completion at this time, but it would be something I would be interested in. Are they gonna become T intersections? What exactly are the people looking at when they're reviewing this information? Is there going to be a change possibly, and not just a mention of a light here or a ramp usage here? Is there something in the plan, their plan, to be able to say this is something that we're looking at or considering? That would be my question.
Well, I think
So in item 3, page 2 of my letter, the applicant has identified that what we refer to as traffic signal warrants, that traffic signal warrants would be satisfied at both ramps for a signal installation. The determination on signalization is up to the county and New York State DOT. It would be typical that they would require geometric improvements before a signal will go in. So we've actually asked the applicant to further the information, not just indicate that it meets warrants, but to show how it would be put in place and that in fact it's feasible and approvable. So.
And the applicant was aware of it?
Yeah, we're looking at Mr. Greeley's comment right now, so we're gonna work through it similar to what we did with the earlier one.
Item 3 pretty much describes what Mary Beth was asking for.
With that, I'll go around to board members to see if there are other comments. And Bill, you have any? Oh, go ahead, sorry, Mary Beth?
Just wanted to, and of course, always my concern of bank erosion, and I know that was mentioned in the response, but maybe a little bit more information could be provided on that.
On which, I'm sorry?
On bank erosion, especially after the storm we just had, that's fresh on everyone's mind. So that would be something to put a little flag on. And my only other comment was in regard to the sewer district, since the property is already in the Cornwall Sewer District, and that usage is already earmarked for that. I would just not see why there would be any change to that. So that was my only thought process.
These are not your final comments. This is a preliminary review, and actually, final comments will be very.
Right, and for more information. would be
Yeah,
great.
okay.
Sure. Just want to reiterate what some of my colleagues mentioned. I think that number one, traffic analysis, those details about key intersections that the town is going to need to work with or not in those areas is going to be critical for us to understand and for these local issues. 2, I know that view is another key area of understanding the impacts of view. And I know there's some things that still haven't been done yet. So that's going to be key, and be able to share that information. Noise and light are there too. But those are the sorts of things as I go through and make comments on, I'm going to focus on. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
It's premature right now for me. I'll wait till the 30 days is up.
Okay, very good. John?
I'm good right now.
No, I'm fine.
About, send my piece about the traffic. and
Yes,
that's
you
central- That's central to its consideration.
And thank you, Bill. Good summary. Good stuff. With that, Dominic, you want to, for the public's edification and for the record, the format of the approach and the 30-day period, comments?
Yes, so with a revised draft environmental impact statement, one that's been proposed for the board's review, the board is supposed to provide its comments within 30 days of receiving that document here. Because of the length of the information that's being provided, the board's time to run that 30 days would be from tonight because you acknowledge receipt and you have your presentation on it. And so the board would be providing your final comments regarding this version of the DEIS at the September 5th meeting, which will be on Tuesday. It's the first Tuesday of September because of Labor Day being on that Monday night.
Okay, at that point, there could be the potential scheduling a public hearing.
The board has two options. If you accept the document as being ready for public review, then the next step would be the scheduling of a public hearing. If, however, you find that there are still items that are required to be provided by the applicant in order for the public to be able to review the document, then the document would be deemed incomplete, and the applicant would then do additional analyses and then provide those to the board, and you would go through the same process at some later date.
Okay, excuse me, Bill, I have a question.
I should know this, but it's not approved. Does it get revised with amendments?
It does.
So it doesn't have to get approved in 30 days.
It does not.
Now, the it is the completion of the completeness of the document.
Completeness compared to the scope.
Correct. Okay. So if there is if the board chooses not to accept it, it's got to be related to the scopes that was originally accepted. Okay.
Correct.
Somebody gets it. Okay, very good. Very good. Okay, with that, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
The board, I have one more item to please the board. Okay, everybody on the board is aware that the letter from Steve Gaba, I believe, related to the public law number 4, everybody aware of it? You want to talk a little bit about it? Okay, and Kristen has consented to give a very brief summary of it so that everybody's aware and we can put it.
So on July 18th, my partner Steve Gaba sent a letter to the board that includes a introductory local law number 4 of the year 2023. These are zoning amendments that the town board is currently considering. And so they've been introduced as a draft local law. And so part of that process, just like you went through recently for the Vet Rep Theater, is for this board to consider and comment on those proposed zoning amendments. Kristen can provide you with an overview, but there's some substantive suggestions here for zoning amendments. My recommendation would be for the board to hear Kristen's comments tonight, take a look at the draft themselves, and then if you're in a position to provide your own comments, you can do so at the September 5th meeting.
Okay, is everybody understanding what Dominic is? Okay, with that, you're on.
Sure, so I'll go through these briefly. I did assist in the preparation, so I can answer any questions that you might have. But section 1, it changes to the GC zone in the town. That's changes to the various uses. So for the most part, it's just removing items that are redundant. So beauty parlor and offices, they're already there in different forms. So it's not necessarily removing the ability for those uses to occur. It's just cleaning up the fact that they're in there twice. The deletion of the language alcoholic beverages, licensed discotheques, cabarets, dance or live entertainment, that's going to be removed so that a use no longer has to come to this board for an approval for, let's say, a bar, and then proceed to the town board for an additional special permit for the alcohol license. So just be under one special permit or one permit through this board only. So that's really just cleaning that up. Section 2 is to allow accessory outdoor recreation facilities, including hotels, clubhouses, country clubs, restrooms, and locker rooms by special permit of the planning board in the agricultural rural residence district. That is that all of those uses I just read will now be permitted as an accessory to recreational uses. So all of those, so that is essentially for the golf course property, which everyone's familiar with, looking to expand that use. That's gonna allow that, all of those uses to be accessory to recreational uses.
By special permit from this board.
Correct. Yes, and that of course would require the site plan and special permit from this point. Section 3 is simply just definitions in relation to those, that the last set of additional regulations. Section 4 is a change to the parking regulations in the Main Street Business District. Currently, this board is allowed to issue a waiver up to 30% of a parking requirement when a use is in that Main Street parking district. This change would allow for a waiver of up to 100% of the parking requirement. That is as a result of a parking study that was done by an engineering firm that the town hired. And that study found that there was additional parking on street all times of the day, so that the town and that engineering firm felt that there was enough spare or on-street parking to allow for the reduction of up to 100% in the district.
That would be at our discretion.
Yes, absolutely. Still the same language where an applicant would have to come to you and provide a rationale as to why they believe they do not need the parking that is assigned to them based on zoning code. So they would need to go through that same exercise as they do now. The final section is just an additional lighting requirement in the site plan development review regulations, and that is basically something that this board does already, which is to require that exterior lighting be limited to security during overnight hours, and that light has to be shielded so as to not be directly visible off-site, which is something that this board already does, but that's going to codify it. And that is it.
Thank you, Kristen. So what the expectation of the board is that we just be prepared to comment next month on those changes.
That's correct.
And we have no approval authority, but simply comment authority, just so everybody knows. I feel you.
Chris, can we just step back a minute on that? I missed Dominic's comment. Who initiated this? Is this cleaning the books? You know, are they trying to update things and make things a little simplified things? What's the purpose of this document?
Very good question.
The bottom line of this document, where is it coming from?
This is a great
Who
question.
initiated
I would say that there's a different purpose for probably each of those sections, to be honest with you. I think that it started with cleaning up the code. At the GC in particular, I think that there were a lot of odd repetitions in there. I think it was trying to clear it up.
Okay.
To kind of encourage economic development. That certainly the request to remove an additional step being to go to the town board for the liquor license when you're already coming to this board to get for the site plan approval for a bar and restaurant. I think certainly to encourage economic development. I did not have really as much to do with the change to the ARR regulations. But you can certainly pose that question in a letter to the town board if you have questions and concerns there. I think the parking certainly, again, was related to economic development and acknowledging that there is, and I think the town board really wanted to know, that's why they undertook that study. I think they wanted to know what they had. I think now that they know, that they felt comfortable reducing it, but I think that was specifically in relation to economic development as well.
That's one of the drivers.
Yes, and ultimately, the majority of the town board has started the process of consideration of these proposals. So they've introduced a draft law. It starts a process where a public hearing will be scheduled, and also the referral to this board has now occurred. And so this board has the opportunity to comment on what you think about collectively regarding the proposed zoning amendments. And then ultimately it'll be up to a majority of the town board as to what they decide to do with all the different things that are included here.
Okay, thank you.
So they're strictly asking for our input, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Chris.
It's for recommendation and comment.
Okay.
Dominic, how did this get to us? Did the town board take action to refer this to the planning board?
They did. Okay. They did. So they have started the formal process of considering this draft.
They're now waiting for a report back from us, more than one we made in June.
Correct, that's one of the steps, and the other steps will be scheduling the public hearing.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, I'll ask for I have no other issues, Lloyd. I don't believe so. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Thank you.